Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with Tom. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, I have officially watched too much football the last month because on the end of the last show, I think I talked about the fact that Notre Dame had, played this game against Georgia where they'd really dominated the first half, but hadn't been able to kind of pull away. And I was like, as I'm rewatching the Sugar Bowl, I'm like, no, this isn't that game at all. I'm thinking of the Texas-Georgia SEC championship game. That's the one I'm thinking of. This was a different one. This is one we watched like half in the airport, half on the plane. There was a portion of this, like, why don't I remember any of this? It's like, we were probably boarding the plane at that point. Yeah, Tony, it has been a long month. It has been a fun month, but it has been a long month.
I'm completely with you. I was wondering, like, why do I only remember bits and pieces of this? Is like, was this going on after the Rose Bowl? Is that why? And like, no, because I remember seeing parts of this, and then some of the memories came flooding back. Others were like, well, this is a completely different game. This is a brand new game for me because now I do remember, as we're talking about it, the internet on the plane was pretty poor as we were trying to watch this game, which made it exceedingly difficult. But yes, it was. You know what? It wasn't just the internet that made watching this game difficult. I'll say that.
Yeah. So we had some Notre Dame fans in the comments on the last one who were upset that we were insufficiently deferential to their incredible offense. I'm just going to give you some stats from this one before we dive into it. And I will remind you, this is a game that Notre Dame won. They were outgained by nearly a yard per play by a not particularly good Georgia offense, 4.9 to 4.0. Riley Leonard, the starting quarterback, threw for 90 yards, 90 entire yards. Tony, 3.75 yards per attempt. I don't know that I've ever seen a non-Service Academy quarterback throw for 3.75 yards per attempt and win a football game. They threw for fewer yards per attempt than they ran for, and they ran for 4.2, which is not exactly, that's fine, but that's not exactly an incredible performance on the ground. The long run of the day by a running back. All game long, they played 60 whole minutes of football here. 8 yards. 8 yards. That almost as long as the long pass of the day for Notre Dame, which was 14 yards. You're going to have questions, I can tell. You're going to have questions about how Notre Dame won this game. And I watched the game. I have some of the same questions, but Tony, the answer, we're going to get into some specifics, but the answer is a lot of short fields. They ran back. Their scoring drives were 49 yards that ended in a field goal, 32 yards that ended in a field goal, 13 yards that ended in a touchdown. They ran a kickoff back for a touchdown, and 29 yards for a field goal. They did not have a scoring drive longer than 49 yards all day, and they only had one longer than 32 yards all day. This was an absolute Jim Tressel masterclass by Notre Dame. It was everything that 2003 Ohio State fans absolutely hated.
It was incredible. Georgia had 4 drives longer than Notre Dame's longest drive of the day, which was 49 yards. Georgia had a 55-yarder, which led to a field goal, a 63-yarder, which led to a touchdown, a 66-yarder, which ended on downs. They had 3 straight possessions end on downs, by the way. And then a 71-yarder, that was their second possession of the game that ended in a fumble at the, that wasn't even the bad fumble that led to the Notre Dame touchdown at the end of the second quarter. This is just another bad fumble in near the red zone. So a lot of squandered opportunities here by Georgia, but also a lot of plays made by Notre Dame. So certainly give them credit. And they held Georgia to just those 10 points on their 4 long drives and, 10 points for the entire game. But I'm watching this and again, Notre Dame was 50% in red zone touchdowns, just one of their 2 trips into the red zone did they score a touchdown. You mentioned the 24 pass attempts for 90 yards. That's not good. There's very little downfield action so far that is successful for Notre Dame. That's not good either. So they had 244 yards of total offense, That is their worst NA win since I had to go way back to just only 2021 to find 242 yards against Wisconsin, where they beat Wisconsin 41-13 with just 242 yards of offense and just 3.5 yards per play. They were 4 yards per play in this game. That one was just 3.5. Was that a Graham Mertz? All things went bad, if I recall.
That was a game. I remember that game. That was, I don't know if I came across the mic, but it was, you said Wisconsin and I went, oh yeah, that was a game that was like, I think Notre Dame was up like 14-10 going to the fourth quarter. And then Wisconsin turned the ball over. I think they might've had like 3 interceptions in the fourth quarter or something like that. Notre Dame, I think, maybe ran a kickoff back or a punt back for a touchdown. It was one of those games that you looked at the final score, and if you had just, like, hey, I got to go rake the leaves, I'm going to just leave here after the third quarter, it's 14-10, I'm sure this will end up close and I can watch the end. And it was, Notre Dame outscored them like 28-0 in the fourth quarter. So yes, that was that game. But yeah, that was another one where they won, and it was like, you have to give them credit for winning, but I'm not sure how sustainable this is as a game plan, because Notre Dame had incredible success rushing the passer and creating turnovers in this game. And the common thread was not, hey, this one Notre Dame guy is good. It was Georgia's left tackle is a turnstile. And that's probably not even like, how people will, be fare beaters on the subway and they, you don't even go through the turnstile. You just kind of leap over it effortlessly. That was Georgia's left tackle in this game. I don't know how Georgia won any football games at all this year, but then you watch Gunnar Stockton get hit right before halftime on a blindside hit as he's throwing, where he gets whacked right in the elbow. And it's like, I literally just watched this happen to Carson Beck one game earlier for Georgia when Kirby Smart did the same thing, where he's like, oh, we're going to try to throw the ball downfield, and right before halftime, and I'm sure the left tackle will do fine, and my quarterback won't get murdered. And it happened again. I'm starting to think, Tony, it's not just the haircut that makes him look like a moron. It was the Notre Dame pass rush absolutely had their way. And, this is one of the things where we need to give credit to the guys, because the guys who made the plays, because they did make plays. Junior Tui Halamaka, number 44, speed rush off the edge for a sack on the blind side. That was at one point in the first half. RJ Oben, number 9, he's a Duke transfer, speed rush off the left edge for a sack on the blind side. That forces a fumble. That gave Notre Dame the ball at the 13-yard line right before halftime. Notre Dame had just, it was 6-3. One play later, they throw to Bo Collins. It's 13-3. And then Jaden Harrison, who's number 2, he runs back the opening kickoff at the second half for a touchdown. So it goes from 6-3 Notre Dame to 20-3 Notre Dame in the span. And they just kicked a field goal before that. So it was really 3-3 to 20-3 in the span of like a minute of game action. And the offense contributed 13 yards to that, 13 yards to that 7 points. So, yeah, the Notre Dame defense was really, really impressive in this game. They Georgia is a flawed team. Georgia was playing a backup quarterback, a turnstile for a left tackle, and their wide receivers all have cinder blocks for hands. So, this is not an absolutely incredible Georgia team, but, they've got pieces. They've got Oscar Delp, the tight end, is a good player. He made a couple nice plays, but it was Notre Dame did to a crappy Georgia offense exactly what a good defense would do to a crappy Georgia offense, and that was 10 points and no more.
Yeah, I was impressed. Basically, the first half of my notes is writing down different Notre Dame defensive players, because they were all making plays like right out of the gates, making plays. Like Jalen Sneed starts the game basically with a tackle for loss, and Joshua Burnham is in there again, and he's a guy that we saw in the first game that we watched against, Indiana, and saw him making some plays. You already mentioned RJ Oben and Tui Alamaka, who had 2 tackles for loss in this one. So there were guys making plays, and there was I think there's an end around in this game. There's an end around where Notre Dame read it so fast. My note was basically, looks like OSU's defense. Xavier Watts, the safety, gets in there and makes a tackle, and It just looked like the kind of pursuit that you see from Ohio State, where everybody's exactly where they should be, and that's what I saw from this defense. You saw linebacker Jack Kaiser force a fumble on some pressure of Gunnar Stockton. Like Jack Kaiser, Drake Bowen, as I mentioned, like those two guys were making plays in the backfield. They were around the ball. So overall, I was impressed with the action from the Notre Dame defense. I'm not impressed at all with this Georgia offense. And I'm sorry to do a yeah, but on this, but Gunnar Stockton had no hope throwing the ball. And when he did, you're seeing like one completed pass, two completed passes downfield. Others were dropped and, bouncing off of shoulder pads and bouncing off of hands. And boy, it is a far cry from what this Georgia program used to be in terms of skill talent, because this one, it's shocking how little, we always say when your best playmaker is your tight end, you're not in a good situation. And I think Georgia's best playmaker may be Oscar Delp, their tight end.
Yeah, I meant to look up who Georgia's wide receivers coach is this year, but that guy should be cleaning toilets on the overnight shift at Waffle House, because the recruiting has obviously not been there. And if the recruiting's been there, I have grave concerns about the development there. They were number one. Every time we watched a Georgia game, and we watched them as we were preparing for Tennessee, we watched them as they were preparing for Texas, and we're watching them now as we're preparing for Notre Dame. And every time it was just Georgia receivers clanking like wide open, like they're getting open and then just clanking, just wide open, hit you right in the hands kinds of passes in a way that, yeah, you'll see receivers drop stuff every once in a while. You don't see that. It was staggering how bad they are. They did get open at times downfield, which is probably the most relevant piece of this in terms of the Ohio State thing, where Georgia was taking lots of shots downfield and stuff was there. They hit like one completion downfield, maybe two. There was a really, really bad drop by Dylan Bell. There was, they got at least one pass interference call downfield on number 29, Christian Gray. He got flagged relatively early, probably not a necessary one. Then Arian Smith got Christian Gray later for one downfield, and then he got away with a really obvious pass interference call in the third quarter. And Georgia was kind of working on him on slants quite a bit. Like you could tell that they felt that was where their advantageous matchup was. So go ahead and put a pin in that for Monday night. Christian Gray, number 29. I do, well, first of all, we need to talk about the first two plays of the game. You mentioned Jalen Sneed. You mentioned Joshua Burnham. I was looking these guys up. Jalen Sneed is from Hilton Head. Joshua Burnham is from Traverse City. I'm like, do they have anyone who makes tackles who is not from like a vacation getaway place? Like, I don't know who where third down is going, but I bet a guy from like Naples, Florida is going to make the tackle on third down. But Leonard Moore, we need to talk a bit about Leonard Moore, number 15. That is a true freshman who stepped in for Benjamin Morrison when he got hurt. Benjamin Morrison was their best corner, hurt his hip against Stanford in October. That's part of why they are so thin and so young at the corner position. I keep waiting for someone to get Leonard Moore because it's a true freshman. So, of course, you're going to get got. And 2 games in, with all the caveats applied that, yeah, Indiana doesn't have a great wide receiver core and Georgia has a terrible wide receiver core, we haven't seen him get got yet. And so, the true freshman is not the guy. I assumed that was like the first thing we heard when we were watching the Indiana game. I was like, oh boy, where's this going to go? And he's been solid. I was absolutely expecting him to be the fish, and he doesn't look like he's the fish. So yeah, we'll see what it looks like against the Ohio State wide receiver core, which is deeper and better than either of the teams that we've watched them play so far. But I come away from my first 2 games now thinking, not bad there.
Watching him in these 2 games has led me to want to watch the USC game, where
I had the exact same thought. I
have to watch that just to see what they can do against a competent passing offense, because we have no idea at this point. So I do want to see him tested because that's not happened yet. And so I'll be doing that at some point. I don't know that we'll do a show about it. Maybe we will, but I feel like we have to see them in an environment that kind of just gives us more information, because we're trying to do this to seek information and put information out. And right now it's just like, I mean, they look good against Georgia and Indiana. I mean, I don't know in terms of, what these corners are, but for a true freshman, you're watching Leonard Moore, you're like, boy, I can 6'2", 190 some pounds. Like he looks good now. Imagine him as a junior when he's playing for Miami. All right. Imagine what it's going to be then. But he's been good. They attack him a little bit with some back shoulder stuff, but and I think both of these games. But Christian Gray is the guy that they really go after, and I made a note that he's kind of IGB level handsy, and I think that's a good descriptor. He gets his hands on people, and sometimes too many hands, both of them, and they did go after him. He's I have one here, Christian Gray holding again, and then then Christian Gray later on gets beat by Arian Smith. Like the time he should have been holding, he got beat. So overall, I think there's an avenue here, but I do need more information on these corners, and because what USC threw for like 360 yards, and I don't know how much of that is corner play versus whatever, but I know watching Georgia's receivers punch footballs instead of trying to catch them. Like these are guys that are like kicking the ball out of the sky because they're trying to keep them away from their hands, basically. And that's just not a good picture for what we're trying to see, basically, in terms of the Ohio State game.
Yeah, I had the exact same thought about the USC game because USC is not a fantastic team this year, but they have a competent passing offense, at least a somewhat competent passing offense. So yeah, we may not do a show on it, but it's probably going to be worth us watching that. One thing that I think is remarkable is how young this Notre Dame defense is. Just playing redshirt freshmen and sophomores and true freshmen all over the place. There was one where it was 3rd and 2, and Georgia had the ball at the Notre Dame 17, and they forced a fumble, and it was number 8, which is either Adon or Aiden, depending. And Greg McElroy has said it 2 different ways on 2 different broadcasts. But Adon Schuler, who is a redshirt freshman safety, he forced the fumble. I mean, they brought 8. He came clean and just put his hat on the football, and Trevor Etienne had no chance. And Travis Etienne. No, Trevor Etienne. Too many Etiennes, Tony. T. Etienne. No, that's too obvious. He forced the fumble. Schuler, redshirt freshman safety. Jaden Osbury, number 4. He's the redshirt freshman linebacker. He recovers a fumble. He's just a very, very young Notre Dame defense. It's also not a particularly big Notre Dame defense, which I think is going to be keep an eye on this as well, because this is one of the things they were talking about a little bit on the broadcast from the Sugar Bowl. Defensive front, a little bit undersized. Howard Cross is 6'1", 288. He was one of the defensive tackle. Donovan Hinish, 6'2", 278. Like, those are guys who are like 20 pounds lighter than the equivalents from Ohio State. Gabriel Rubio is a backup who was getting more snaps after Riley Mills went out. He's 6'5", 316, but he's the only defensive lineman who's over 291 pounds and who's not a freshman eligibility-wise. And Rubio only played in 8 games this season. So it's a little bit undersized, not particularly experienced defensive line on the whole. They have guys who can make plays. Bryce Young, number 30, coming off the edge, he was impressive at times. We're going to talk. That reminds me. Don't let me forget to talk about special teams.
No, don't worry.
But it's just there's a lot of stuff you look at and you go, they're going to have to work around that. And, you're going to have to work around the fact that your corners are young and maybe one of them's not particularly great. And you're going to have to work around the fact that your defensive line is a little light in the shorts. And you're going to have to work around. And it's like, you only get so many workarounds. Like your defensive coaches and your offensive coaches are only so clever. And, you can't, Tony, there's an old saying about what you can't make chicken salad out of. And, it feels like they're going to be really burning the midnight oil trying to figure out how to make chicken salad for this game in a couple different places.
The Georgia running game, just 62 yards and 29 carries, but 40 yards in losses because of Gunnar Stockton. He was sacked 4 times, but for some reason they also decided to make him their Riley Leonard in terms of trying to run the ball through the quarterback, where Trevor Etienne and Nate Frazier, their top two running backs, combined for 15 carries for 75 yards. So like they were doing okay, even though Frazier's long was a 28-yarder and his other three only went for 9. But there was just no sustained running game for them because of the too many lost yardage plays from Stockton or the drops, or they just could not maintain anything. Whereas the Notre Dame offense is all about just staying on schedule. And one of my notes here, Tom, is actually 2 notes, but we'll just follow me here. My note here is this is UM's offense, which is, we'll say this is Michigan's offense, which is 4 yards on first down, run the quarterback for another 3 or 4, and then run the quarterback again for another 2 or 3 yards, and you've got yourself a first down, or just a little easy pass play. Riley Leonard, 14 carries for 80 yards in this one. Jadarian Price, 10 for 37. Jeremiah Love, 6 for 19. Like, as a team, they went for 154 yards on 4.2 yards per carry, but 80 of that was Riley Leonard. And I'd say more than the yards, like he was the consistent running game. He's what allowed them to maintain something. And so I say that this is UM's offense. We saw what Michigan did to Ohio State. They beat Ohio State, and they did it methodically, and they didn't care about they didn't really care about the future. It's just like, we're going to take care of this play, then we're going to take care of this next play, and then third and short, we'll power through. And really, then it becomes, well, do we want to go for this 4th and 1? Sure, why not? They're going to stop us from getting 1 yard. We'll run Riley Leonard 3 times in a row if we have to. So Ohio State's going to have their work cut out in terms of stopping the extra hat, basically, for the Notre Dame offense. And so Riley Leonard, to me, is a combination of Alex Orji and Davis Warren. And I'm not saying he's the best of both of those guys. I'm saying he's a combination of those guys. And he's probably about as good a thrower as Davis Warren, and probably about as good a runner as Alex Orji. And we know what happened when Michigan went to Ohio Stadium and took this offense there.
Yeah, and, Leonard he doesn't look, I'm trying not to say deceptively athletic, Tony. I'm really trying to not say deceptively athletic, but he doesn't look like someone who should be able to make you miss in the open field, and yet guys keep missing. So that makes me think that it's not just bad defense. Like it's something there with Riley Leonard. He had a couple where it was 3rd and long, 3rd and 8, 3rd and 7, and he picked it up on scrambles. And that's impressive. That's something you don't necessarily expect, especially when there's not really a downfield passing threat. It's not like, well, you gotta play your safeties way back, Tony, because that Notre Dame offense, they're going to take their shots downfield. Like the only time they got close to completing a pass downfield was that 4th and 1 after they ran the punt team out and then ran the punt team off, and they caught Georgia just completely out of sorts and then drew them off sides, and they knew they had a free play, and he had to throw to Bo Collins, or Bo Collins was covered. But it was the only time there was a throw downfield that you're like, oh, this might actually be completed. And it wasn't, but it was kind of close. There were several others that went, 4 yards over his head or whatever, where there was just no chance downfield. But Leonard in the run game is dangerous. And it feels like 4th and short, like that's going to be Riley Leonard time. It's going to be, I go back to JT Barrett, where you would just sit up in the press box and you go, well, it's 3rd and 1. What do you think's going to happen? Let's see. Are they going to put a wide receiver in motion? There you look, a wide receiver in motion. Hey, are they going to run QB power over the right? Hey, look, they're running QB power. Right. Unbelievable. How did Tony, they can't keep getting away with it. And it's the same way that JT Barrett was just kind of like, well, it's 3rd and 2. They're going to run QB power and he's going to get 2.7 yards and they're going to pick up the first down. It's the same thing with Riley Leonard. And I'm sure Ohio State fans are going to get extremely frustrated if he can do that against them, because it's like this shouldn't keep working, and yet somehow it keeps working because it's just he'll bounce off a tackle. And he did get stuffed on one of these at one point, but you could, I think Ohio State's probably going to be very aggressive with, Lathan Ransom on a run blitz, Caleb Downs on a run blitz, coming in and trying to stop that short, because Ohio State has not been easy to run on in short yardage. So that's going to be a very, very interesting matchup to watch. Another interesting thing to watch, Jordan Faison. I mean, we talked about him on the last show, number 6 wide receiver. He didn't have quite the productivity day that he did in the previous game against Indiana, but he was unquestionably the leading wide receiver in this game. Just, nothing exciting. Like I said, the long pass that it was 14 yards. It wasn't like, oh boy, they are lighting it up. Just very involved. A lot of 7-yard pickups. They'll give it to him in the run game. Tony, did you know that he also plays lacrosse on Notre Dame's 2024 national championship lacrosse team? I've only heard that 3 times in 2 games. Tony, did you know that Tommy Zibikowski is also a boxer? Did you have any idea? Tony, Brady Quinn's sister, do you have any idea who she's married to? Do you have any idea? Like, this is the new Notre Dame fun fact that's like, all right, guys, like, assume people have watched these other games and bring some new content this time, please. Thank you.
I'm sure there are other noteworthy, newsworthy things that tie these two programs together that we'll come up with. Maybe a secretary named Holtz, and Lou Holtz's secretary is named Day. I don't know. We'll figure it out. I'll ask around, see what we can find. You did kind of steal the thunder on my next point, which is this is UM's offense, meaning Urban Meyer, and this is JT Barrett all over again. And I would say this is the 2016 Ohio State offense a little bit, because this is the same offense that got shut out in the college football playoffs. And you look at the receivers that Ohio State had at that point, you're talking like Austin Mack, Benjamin Victor, KJ Hill, like not legit long-term NFL players at receiver. And that's kind of what I think Notre Dame is dealing with their receivers as well. And also the accuracy of their quarterback. And I know what I'm saying about JT Barrett. Like, if people go back and watch any of those 2016 games where you see like the level of passing play at Ohio State before Ryan Day and the Ryan Day's quarterbacks to after he arrived and brought in, Dwayne Haskins, or not brought in, but they were able to utilize Dwayne Haskins and Justin Fields and CJ Stroud. The level of passing play has gone way up, and you watch a 2016 game and you're like, it shouldn't be this hard to complete a pass. That's kind of what I see when I watch this Notre Dame offense. And I remember covering that 2016 Clemson game where they were shut out 31-0. In the days before the game, at the one of the availabilities, the Clemson defense was talking all kinds of like, yeah, they can't throw on us. They don't have, JT Barrett's a good player. He doesn't have the arm to do what he needs to do. So we're not really worried about that. At the time, you're like, these guys are crazy. And then you see what happens. And so this really reminds me of that 2016 Ohio State passing game, and really, frankly, the offense as a whole, which sometimes just gets covered over because of a dominating running game, but also at times gets a little bit exposed.
Yeah, I think that's, I'm not, Tony, one of my steadfast rules over the years has been you never pick anyone to go undefeated, and you never pick anyone to get shut out. And I don't think Notre Dame's going to get shut out in this one, but I think you're going to see them have trouble moving the ball consistently. And there's a bunch of stuff that factors into that. Some of it's injuries on the offensive line. We talked about the injuries on the offensive line a bunch on the last show, so we don't need to relitigate all of that. I did watch Emil Wagner, who's the right tackle for Notre Dame, number 59, kind of closely in this game, because that's been a storyline for the previous 3 opponents for Ohio State in the playoff. Is, boy, the right tackle kind of gets worked. And we've sort of identified that as an issue coming in. And this is not quite an issue to the degree that we've seen it before. But he really didn't have any big issues against Indiana. And then he had some issues in this one, got away with a hold at one point, and then still gave up a deflected pass and a pressure on the opening possession. He had a false start on the second possession. You saw some pressure coming off the right end. Again, nothing. We're not looking at this, at least I'm not right now, in the way that we looked at John Campbell for Tennessee and went, oh, this is going to be a bad time. You are going to have a bad time. And kind of the same thing with Johnny Cornelius, and kind of the same thing with Cameron Williams, right tackle for Texas, who I saw declared for the NFL draft. And I thought, okay, after having the day that he had against Jack Sawyer, okay, I don't think, I'm not looking at this as quite that much of a red flag, but it feels like there's there's going to be something there for Ohio State at some point during the course of the game. Again, I'm very interested in watching the Penn State game because I know that Abdul Carter had a big day, and I know Deni Dennis Sutton had a pretty good day. So going to be interested in watching where that happened, where that came from in that game. But I think that's certainly let's just say that's a continue to monitor this space kind of thing for me in terms of that right tackle matchup on Emil Wagner versus like a Jack Sawyer.
Yeah, that was one of my notes as well. Just not Emil Wagner's best game. Now, granted, I've only seen 2 full games so far, and this was certainly the worst that I've seen. But Jalen Walker, their outside linebacker, got him once, and so he was kind of put through his paces. And you're looking for anything, and I guess it's easier to call out the offensive tackles because they're out there on the edge. But yeah, that was noticeable at times. In terms of some of the other stuff, I'm just looking here. I guess we can move to the well, before we go to the special teams. Here's an issue that I have with Riley Leonard and as a quarterback, and just as a quarterback, he throws a pass, it gets batted at the line, he catches it, and he scrambles and he throws it again. Great, fun play. This is what college football is all about. You have to know the rule that you can only throw the ball once, right? And if you don't know that, then you should. But this is the same team that put 10 guys on the line of scrimmage or on a defense. So I guess I can't assume too much. But if you also do know the rule and you're still throwing it, nothing good can happen from that throw. Bad things can happen from that throw, and bad things can stay happened through that throw with an interception or something like that. You have no business making that throw, making that kind of play. There's no excuse for it to either not know the rule or know the rule and still do it. So that, to me, that's just like a red flag in terms of, boy, this is not a great thing that a quarterback has done or that he's capable of doing something like this. And I will say, my first experience with Riley Leonard, I believe, was the North Carolina game in 2022 when he was incredible in like a 38-35 loss where he rushed for 140 yards. And as Chip Kelly said on Tuesday, he's the kind of quarterback that will scrape himself up off the ground and get to the huddle and make the next play. A ton of respect for all of that. But I don't know how you throw a pass, catch it, and think, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to throw it again. That's a huge red flag to me.
I watched that. That was like the first play of the game on offense too. I think that was a lot of adrenaline, and it's the first play of the game or the first play in offense anyway. And you might have had a little bit of an oh crap when there was a Georgia defender right there and your instinct is to throw the ball because you've got the ball and you're not thinking about the fact that this play has already included a pass. Yeah, Will Howard has had a couple have you played football before kind of plays this year where, you've played football for 5 years, but you can still do something kind of wacky sometimes. I don't, that's not as much of a red flag to me. I understand why it could be for people, but
this to me is running 10 yards beyond the line of scrimmage and throwing the ball. Like, what are you doing?
I mean, it's a weird play. It's a weird one-off play. That's not something that is like, well, this is going to be a recurring issue. Like that's about as big of a one-off as you're going to have. So to me, I kind of look at that and kind of go, it's fine. I have bigger concerns about his ability to throw the ball downfield and also to stay alive through trying to run the ball 27 times against this Ohio State defense with the way they're hitting people right now. But that's a separate concern. Okay, let's talk about the special teams because boy, if I had to use one word to describe the special teams for Notre Dame in this game, I would use the word eventful. It's sort of value neutral there. It's like, well, that could be a good word. That can be a bad word. And it was, in fact, both on this one. Mentioned earlier the kickoff return for touchdown. That was a great play. Tony, how many times have you seen the same player get back-to-back running into the kicker penalties, at least one of which could have very easily been a 15-yarder that gave Georgia a first down? Bryce Young, the number 30, you saw him as an edge rusher against Indiana, and a little bit in this game as well. But I look at that and it's like, boy, that's two plays where you're really leaving things in the hands of the officials to make a subjective call that does not give the opponent another possession. And I also look at that and I go, well, I understand all of this. And we can maybe have a broader conversation about Notre Dame's approach in this game and what they're going to have to do to win the game. But I look at that and I go, yeah, I understand absolutely why you're being so aggressive in special teams. If you're going to be doing dive bomber missions on the punter multiple times in a row, like that feels like something that's a level of aggressiveness that you could probably take advantage of with a fake at some point. Cause it just feels like Notre Dame is almost certainly going into this game going, we have to get turnovers on defense. We have to make plays on defense. We have to make plays on special teams to try and get some points. Cause I think they're coming in, they have to know, right? I mean, they have to know that this is not an offense that's going to score 30 points on this Ohio State defense. And so you're going to have to probably, to get to 24, 28, 31 points, which is probably where you need to get to win this game, you're going to have to return a kickoff for a touchdown, block a punt for a touchdown, get a turnover to set up a short field. Like they did all that stuff against Georgia in this game. So it's like, they can do it, but I think they're going to have to take some real big chances in this game to do it. And that might be something that opens up opportunities on the flip side for Ohio State to capitalize on that.
Notre Dame definitely knows they're going to have to win this one the hard way, so they're preparing for that. And Ohio State is doing the absolute same. They know that Notre Dame is going to come in and just bare knuckle fist fight this game for 60 minutes. And the special teams, great opportunity to steal a possession or just do some odd things. They had the complete line change from the punt unit to back to offense on like a 4th down and whatever, 4th and 5-ish or so from their own 30-yard line or whatever, that forced Georgia to then bring out their defense and then commit an offsides penalty. And Notre Dame was never going to go for it. It was a 4th and short, and they picked it up with the offside. But you saw Kirby Smart yelling, "You can't do that. They can't do that," changing out their entire, going from the punt unit to the offense. And basically, they're going to either get they're trying to get an offsides, what they got, or they could have maybe tried to have a timeout burned or something like that. But they're doing things. They're trying things. And Ryan Day or maybe Jim Knowles on Tuesday talked about, they know that the Notre Dame special teams is going to throw out everything. It's a lot like playing Rutgers and Greg Schiano. It's like playing Dan Lanning, except maybe like you have to know there could be something, but it's going to be like a smart something more than like a crazy kind of something. I think it's not a dangerous style of football for Notre Dame, but it is one where you've got to be ready for a lot of different things special teams wise, because they do have a guy who has now at least 3 career kickoff returns for touchdowns, and their kicker is back at it. He put 3 for 3 on long, like 40 plus, 45 plus field goals in this one. So a quality day, other than the back-to-back running into the kicker. And you asked if I'd ever seen that before. No, in fact, not until this very game.
Yeah, and going to the point about the turnovers, Notre Dame is number 1 in the country. They've forced 32 turnovers this year, up to the present. I think it was 31 through this game, and they forced 1, I think, against Penn State. But number 1 in the country in terms of forcing turnovers, and they're going to have to do that to beat Ohio State. And that means you're probably going to see a lot of blitzing. They've got to be very aggressive. They are plus 1.13 turnovers per game, which is 5th in the country. So the turnover margin, pretty good. There was a stat in this game where they're pressuring opposition quarterbacks on 45% of dropbacks. So 45% of the time your quarterback drops back, there is some kind of pressure on him, which is the best in the country. So again, like I don't think it's probably a great big secret that we're watching these games and going, Ohio State should beat this team. But I also don't think it's a great big secret that you can see how, if Notre Dame's going to win this game, you can see how it's going to happen. They're going to force turnovers. Mm-hmm. They are going to keep Ohio State's score low. They're going to run the ball. They're going to it's going to be a bunch of 4 yards on first down, 3 yards on second down, 3.3 yards on 3rd and 3, and it's going to be Riley Leonard every time on the ground, and then you keep the chains moving, you keep the clock rolling. It's going to be a bunch of that, and you got to steal a possession. You got to do what Oregon did the first time out in Eugene. You surprise onside kick, fake punt, whatever it is, like you got to steal a possession on special teams. Ohio State, if both teams play their A+ game or their A- game or their B+ game or their C+ game, Ohio State wins all of those games. Every single one of those games, Ohio State wins. Notre Dame has to play an A game against a B- Ohio State game, and that means, hey, you're stealing a possession, you're getting a turnover, you're creating some short fields. They can win this game, but it's gonna take, they're gonna have to get into their bag a little bit to do it, I think.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I'm just looking here, 3 of their scoring drives took up 74 total yards. So if Notre Dame has 3 scoring drives of 32 yards or less against Ohio State, it's a 4-quarter game. This is one, you're talking about Notre Dame using short fields. Ohio State, clearly something bad has happened on those possessions to allow that. So their scoring chances are negated on their own. So Notre Dame needs short fields by way of turnovers, by way of aborted possessions, things like that, where Ohio State's not able to make any noise with their possession, and Notre Dame doesn't have to go far with theirs. Like this Georgia game is a blueprint. The Michigan game is a blueprint. I know people say, well, what about that Texas game and how they handled Jeremiah Smith? Notre Dame plays way too much man to kind of just flip everything and become a zone team now. So they're going to be what they are with those defensive backs, and they'll live and die by that. And Marcus Freeman will challenge his guys to handle the Ohio State receivers, but it comes down to creating turnovers and getting after the quarterback. And if they do that, then they can absolutely win. If they do not create any turnovers, then they're going to have to play almost a perfect game and just fight Ohio State and force punts and hope that all of those punts you force, you're able to score somewhere at some point 24 points and hold Ohio State to 21.
Well, this is a game where if Notre Dame can hang in there and just do all the stuff you said there and just keep it close and drag it out and turn it into a 4-quarter game, they can win the game. Mm-hmm. If Ohio State comes out and jumps out to a 14-0 lead early, this could be a very bad time, like an extremely bad time for Notre Dame. It's just, if you tell me what the score is at the end of the first quarter, and I'll tell you probably more or less how the game goes, I think. Before we go, I did want to just share one more of the great adventures in scrolling through the Notre Dame roster. Number 34, linebacker, sophomore, Drake Bowen. Sure, absolutely. Drake Bowen. Tony, would you like to guess how you spell Drake?
D-R-A-Y-K-E.
D-R-A-Y-K. Tony, let me just be the first to say, I hate it. Hate the Drake. Tony, D-R-A-Y-K. These kids today with their names and sounding like they're, I don't know, like dragons on Game of Thrones or something. Spell it like the snack cakes. Come on. Everyone knows how to spell Drake. Come on. No, I don't care for it, Tony.
So, I think that's all I've got. And before we head on out of here, I just want to remind you guys about Grateful Griddle, who is sponsoring some of our shows here. And so I would say gratefulgriddleoh.com. Check them out. They will take your events to the next level, whether it's wedding, corporate event, birthday parties. They've got a Columbus food truck catering that serves up mouth-watering smash burgers, customizable menus, and unbeatable service. So head out to gratefulgriddleoh.com and let them handle the flavor while you enjoy the fun. I want to thank them again. And also, thank you all for tuning in. Hit the thumbs up before you go. If you're watching on YouTube, we would appreciate that. And of course, you can hit the bell to be notified. We're going to be dropping videos as you guys know. Subscribe to the channel if you've not yet done so. And of course, find us at BuckeyeHuddle.com. First month, just $4.99. Check out the Buckeye Huddle message board presented by Jeff Reeby's Columbus. And I will let you guys know, we've got some things that we're doing for our subscribers that you guys will want to check out. Some things that we're trying. We've got some giveaways going on and some things we're doing for people behind there on the message board if you want to check that out. Some cool stuff there. So thank you all for tuning in, and we will talk to you guys later.